Once you do strategic planning, so you get the strategic plan for the entire business. The strategic planning involves selecting the goals. So most planning uses SMART goals, alignment with short-term goals. So whenever strategic planning has to be done, it should be in alignment with the short-term goals. Hello everyone, I am Purnima, faculty in the Department of Commerce and Management, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. I welcome you all to this session. So in this session of Unit 2, we will be having a discussion on what is strategic planning. Now let us understand what is the meaning of the word strategic planning. So strategic planning is a process in which an organization's leaders defines their vision for the future and they identify the organizational goal and objectives. Now, what do we mean by strategic planning? Here, strategic planning refers to identification of the vision of the organization. So, what is the vision and what are the goals and what are the objectives? Then, next is the process includes establishing the sequence in which those goals should be realized so that the organization can reach its stated vision. So we all know that whenever a business has to be set up, it will always be with the vision of the founders of the organization. So when we have the vision, so we have the goals as per the vision. So based on the vision, we have the goals of the organization, and along with the goals, we have the objectives. Now, in strategic planning, it includes the sequence in which the goals are to be accomplished. So it will tell us, so in planning, it will tell us what are the goals to be accomplished first, and then what are the other goals which had to be followed. So in this way, the organization can reach its stated vision so that we can reach the vision of the organization. So in strategic planning, we just decide about what is the vision and what are the goals to be set up, what are the objectives to be set up, and we just prioritize what are the goals to be achieved first and later on what are the goals to be achieved next. Now, next, so strategic planning typically represents mid to long-term goals with a lifespan of 3 to 5 years, though it can go longer. So, in strategic planning, we will be having a planning relating to the goals for the 3 to 5 years. So, what the company should achieve in the next 3 years and what the company should achieve in the next 5 years. So, this is different than business planning. Why? Which typically focuses on short-term and tactical goals such as how a budget is divided up. The time covered by a business plan can range from several months to several years. Now, if you have a comparison of the strategic plan and the business plan, we can see that in a strategic plan, it runs up from 3 to 5 years, whereas in a business plan, it will run from few months to maximum 1 year. And then in a strategic plan, so we will be deciding about the vision. So based on the vision, we will be doing, whereas in case of a business plan, we will be focusing on the short term or the tactical goals of the business. So the product of strategic planning is a strategic plan. So once you do strategic planning, so you get the strategic plan for the entire business. So it is often reflected in the plan document or other media. So these plans can be easily shared, understood, and followed by various people, including the employees, customers, business partners, and investors. So whenever we do a strategic plan, the plan should be easy to understand. So whether it is the employees, whether it is the customers, whether it is the investors or the business partners, they should be able to understand the plans very well. Only then we can implement the plans very easily. So we say that a strategic plan is a product of strategic planning. Next, so organizations conduct strategic planning periodically to consider the effect of changing business, industry, legal and regulatory conditions. A strategic plan may be updated and revised at that time to reflect any strategic changes. So, the organizations, they conduct strategic planning periodically. Why they have to conduct it periodically? To consider the changing businesses. So, what is the changing business? So, what is the environment which is changing? How the industry is changing? What are the changing legal conditions? And what are the regulatory conditions? So, all these changes have to be taken care of, and only then we can do strategic planning. So, it may be the updated and revised at the time to reflect any strategic changes. So, based on the changes in the environment in and around the industry, we try to update our strategic plans. So, businesses need direction and organizational goals to work towards. So, whatever may be the business, it needs a direction, it needs a goal, it needs a vision towards which all the activities have to be directed. So, it offers that type of guidance. So, essentially, a strategic plan is a roadmap to get to the business goals. So, whenever we have a strategic plan, it will lead us to the business goals. So, without such a guidance, there is no way to tell whether a business is on track to reach its goals. So, these strategic plans are formulated to achieve the business goals, or these plans, they give a sense of direction to the business. So, without a strategic plan, we do not know where actually the business is heading. Next, so let us look into the 4 aspects of strategy development. So, how do you develop a strategy? So, before developing a strategy, what are the things we should consider? The first one is the mission. Strategic planning starts with a mission that offers the company a sense of purpose and direction. So, when you have a mission for the company, so what will be the mission? So, based on the mission, the company will have its purpose and direction. It will know where it is actually heading. So, this mission becomes very, very important. Then, the organization mission describes who it is, what it does, and where it wants to go. So, whenever we are having or we are writing a mission for the organization, we should answer these questions. Now, what are the questions to be answered here? Who it is, that is what the company is, and what it does, so what it is doing, and where it wants to go. So, what is the direction in which the company is heading? So, if the mission can answer all these questions, then we can say that missions are very successful. So, missions are typically broad but actionable. So, missions are the broad statements which the company will be working. So, these missions are broad, but they should be actionable. Actionable in the sense, these missions should be achieved. For example, a business in the education industry might seek to be a leader in the online virtual education tools and services. Now, we all are aware of the latest development in the education industry, especially after COVID. We see that there are a lot of industries which are coming up, which offer online education. So, this online education is become the norm of the day. So, they try to bring in almost all the tools and services in order to see that the children learn online. So, online they are trying to popularize this online education. So, where you just see that the students understand the concept like they were in the class. So, this is how they try to capitalize or try to get more, or they try to have their business in the online virtual education mode. So, the next we will look into the strategy, that is the goals. Strategic planning involves selecting the goals. So, whenever we are doing strategic planning, it is nothing but the selection of the goals. Now, what are goals? Most planning uses SMART goals. Now, what does this SMART goal stands for? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time bound or other objectively measurable goals. So, whenever we are involved in strategic planning, it should be in the choosing the SMART goals. So, goals should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time bound. So, measurable goals are important because they enable the business leaders to determine how well the business is performing against the goals and the overall mission. So, we should have the strategic development based on the goals of the business. Now, the goal should be measurable. So, measurable in quantified terms. When we think of quantity, so we will know when we just define our goals in terms of quantitative goals, then we will be able to easily measure the goals. So, how far we have performed and how far we have to go. So, all this can be easily determined when we have these measurable goals. Then, goal setting for the fictitious educational business might include releasing the first version of a virtual classroom platform within 2 years or increasing the sales of an existing tool by 30% in the next year. So, here is an example of having the goals for the business. So, if you are setting a goal for the educational business or the virtual or the online education as you call, so when you have an online education, that is the goal of your business. So, how to just popularize this online education? So, you just release the first version of the virtual classroom. So, whatever is the virtual classroom is there. So, you release the first version of the classroom and within 2 years, so increasing the sales by 30%. So, you try to see that you have more and more subscribers for your virtual classroom. So, in this way, we have to set up the goals for the business. Next one is alignment with short-term goals. So, whenever strategic planning has to be done, it should be in alignment with the short-term goals. So, it relates directly to short-term tactical business planning and can help business leaders with everyday decision making that better aligns with business strategy. So, whenever we are involved in strategic planning, it relates to the short-term tactical business planning. So, whatever is the short-term goals. So, short-term goals may be for 1 month to 6 months, and these short-term goals, so it should align with the strategic planning and decision making. So, for the fictitious educational business, leaders might choose to make strategic investments in communication and collaboration technologies such as virtual classroom software and services, but decline opportunities to establish physical classroom facilities. So, alignment with the short-term goals in the sense, suppose if you take the example of an online educational business or educational institution, so their strategic investment short-term goals will be communication and collaboration with technologies. So, what are the various kinds of technologies you need to start a virtual classroom? So, for that, what are the various collaborations you need, or what are the various agreements you have to enter into so that we just have success in that particular business, but they don't want to enter into the physical classroom business. So, these are the various things we should consider with strategic planning. Now, the fourth aspect of strategy development is evaluation and revision. Now, strategic planning helps leaders periodically evaluate the progress against the plan and make changes or adjustments in response to changing conditions. So, what are the changing conditions of the business and how the business has to adjust to the changing conditions? So, these are all the things which the strategic planners they have to think of. For example, a business may seek a global presence, but legal and regulatory restrictions could emerge that affects its ability to operate in certain geographic regions. Now, suppose the business has a vision to start to have a global presence. In the sense, it wants to open its office all over the world. Suppose it is a MNC, then it wants to operate in almost all the countries of the world. So that is a very good mission. But then there may be certain legal and regulatory restrictions. So some countries, they may not like to have a foreign company into their country. So when they impose such restrictions, so they may restrict the operation of the mission. So as a result, business leaders might have to revise their strategic plan to redefine objectives or change the progress metrics. So there are certain restrictions which are imposed on these business companies. Then these strategic planners, they have to revise the strategic plan to redefine objectives or change the progress metrics. Now, let us look into the steps in strategic planning process. So, there are different ways to approach the strategic planning depending on the type of business and the granularity required. So, most business cycles can be summarized in these 5 steps. So, depending on the nature of the business and the nature of the situation, so we can have the business plans. So, the steps in strategic planning processes, the first one is identify. So, what should we identify? A strategic planning cycle starts with the determination of the business's current strategic position. So, whenever, what should the planner identify here? So, he should identify what is the current strategic position of the business. So, this is where the stakeholders use the existing strategic plan, including the mission statement and the long-term goals, to perform assessment of the business and its environment. So, what should they identify? They should identify what is the mission statement, what are the strategic long-term goals, to perform assessment of the business and its environment. So, these assessments include an assessment of the SWOT, that is the strength, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, analysis to understand the state of business and the path ahead. So, whenever you are into the strategic planning, first thing is you identify the state of the business and what is the path ahead for the business. Then, the next important strategic planning is prioritize. Now, what is this prioritize? Set objectives and initiatives that line up with the company mission and goals and will move the business towards achieving its goals. Now, when you talk of prioritize, so it means that you should try to set objectives and initiatives so that the company's mission and goals will move the business towards achieving the goals. So, there may be potential goals. So, planning prioritizes the most important, relevant and the urgent ones. So, whenever we are having the plans, so we should decide what is the most important goals, then the relevant goals and then the urgent ones. So, the goals may include a consideration of a resource requirement such as budgets and equipment, and they often involve a timeline and business metrics or KPIs for measuring the progress. So, whenever we have a goal for the business, we should see that it includes budgets and it also includes equipment, and they should also all involve a timeline also. So, when we have a time bound goal, then we can say that that plan will be more suitable. Then next one is develop. So, this is the main thrust of strategic planning, in which the stakeholders collaborate to formulate the steps or tactics necessary to attain the stated strategic objective. So, what do we develop here? We develop the steps or the tactics through which we can achieve the strategic objective. So, it may involve creating numerous short-term tactical business plans that fit into the overarching strategy. So, the overarching strategy may be the corporate level goals. So based on the corporate level goals, so we fix the short-term tactical business goals, so in order to achieve the strategic plans. Then stakeholders involved in plan development use various tools such as strategy map to help visualize and tweak the plan. So the stakeholders involved in plan development, so those who are the most important planners of the business, so they use the strategy map to help visualize and tweak the plan. So they should be able to visualize the plan and then they have to tweak the plan. So developing the plan may involve cost and opportunity trade-offs that reflect business priorities. So whenever we are developing a plan, we have to think about what is the cost of that and what are the opportunity cost, etc. Only then we can involve in strategic planning. So they may reject some initiatives if they don't support the long-term strategy. So they should see that all the plans, whatever are being developed, so they should come to a conclusion after looking into the cost of the plans and also the opportunity cost. And if it is not supporting the long-term goals, then such plans can be discarded. Then the next step in the strategic planning is implementation. So this implementation part is one of the hardest part. So policies can be easily formulated because they are always in black and white, but then implementation part is very hard. So why it is very hard? So it is time to put in motion. It requires clear communication across the organization to set responsibilities, make investments, adjust policies and processes, and establish measurement and reporting. So when we have to implement any policy which has been decided or any plan which has been decided, so what does it need? It requires clear communication across the organization. So the plan should be clearly communicated across the organization. Secondly, set responsibilities. So who is responsible for whom? That also has to be decided. Then make investment. So whenever the plan is put into action, it involves money. So you make investment. Adjust policies. So you adjust the policies and processes so that you are able to implement the plan. Establish measurement and reporting. So we establish the measurement and reporting of the plans. So how far the plans have been successful, how far they have to become successful, all this we have to think. And implementation typically includes strategic management with regular strategic reviews to ensure that plans stay on track. So whenever we are implementing the plans, so it should be with regular strategic reviews. So you have to collect a feedback about these plans so that the plans are always on track. Then the next one is update. A strategic plan is periodically reviewed and revised to adjust priorities and re-evaluate goals as business conditions change and new opportunities emerge. So it should be periodically reviewed and revised. So why it is periodically reviewed and revised? Because to adjust priorities and reevaluate the goals of the business. So we should know what is the top priority, what is the next, what is the next. So in this way, we should see that as the business conditions change, the plans also should keep on changing. So quick reviews of metrics can happen quarterly and adjustments to the strategical plan can occur annually. So whenever we have a review, you can have a quick reviews happening quarterly. So once in 3 months you have a review of the plan and then adjustments you can do annually. Then stakeholders may use balanced scorecards and other tools to assess performance against goals. So we should see that the goals can be measured in quantitative terms. So in this way, we can know what way each department is doing. Then next is a committee typically leads the strategic planning process. Now, who will do this strategic planning? It will be done by a committee of the organization. Now, planning experts recommend the committee including representatives from all areas within the enterprise and work in an open and transparent way where information is documented from start to finish. So, whenever we are engaged in strategic planning, so it will be within a committee, and the committee should have representatives from all the departments of the company. So, this committee should work in an open and transparent way where the information is documented. So, whatever work they are doing, so everything will be documented from the start to the finish. Then the committee researches and gathers information needed to understand the organization's current status and factors that will affect it in the future. So, whenever strategic planners are involved, so they do research and they gather information from the various departments of the organization, and then when they gathered all the information, they will be able to clearly know what is the current status of the organization and what are the factors that affect it in the future. So, it should solicit input and feedback to validate or challenge the assessment of the information. The committee should solicit input and feedback to validate or challenge its assessment of the information. So, whenever the committee should solicit input and feedback to validate or challenge its assessment of the information. So, this is the work of the committee in strategic planning. Then, the committee can opt to use one of the many methodologies or strategic frameworks that have been developed to guide leaders through this process. So, whenever they get lot of information from all of the departments, they can use any of the strategic frameworks in order to study the information. So, whatever is developed by all these departments, they have to study that information and then they have to develop the strategic plan. So, these methodologies take the committee through a series of steps that include an analysis or assessment of strategy formulation. So, when they collect all the information, the next step is they have to analyze the situation of the business and then assess the strategy formulation and articulation and communication of the actions needed to move the organization towards this strategic vision. So, in strategic formulation, they should know what are the different activities to be undertaken. So, what is the action needed and where the action has to be taken in order to see that the organization moved towards the strategic vision. Then, the committee creates benchmarks that will enable the organization to determine how well it performs against its goals as it implements the strategic plans. So, the committee creates benchmarks or it will create the short-term goals so that the organization will know exactly where it is heading. So, the planning process should also identify which executives are accountable for ensuring that benchmarking activities take place at planned times and that specific objectives are met. So, it will also make certain persons accountable for the implementation of the plans so that all the activities are going as per the plans and that will be time bound goals so that specific objectives are met. So, when you have specific objectives to be met, then you can have this time bound plans. Then, there are no uniform dictate the frequency of a strategic planning cycle. However, they are common approaches. So, we have the quarterly reviews. So, whenever we have a strategic plan which has to be implemented, then we also should have a review of those plans. Now, the first type is the quarterly review. So, once a quarter is usually a convenient time frame to revisit assumptions made in the planning process and to gauge progress by checking metrics against the plans. So, whenever quarterly process is a very convenient time. So, once in 3 months, you just assess how the plans are being implemented and how each department is implementing the plans. So in this way, we can know what is the progress made by the company in terms of implementation. Then next one is annual reviews. So a yearly review lets business leaders assess metrics for the previous 4 quarters and make informed adjustments to the plans. So when you have an annual review, usually for the 4 quarters that the company has worked. So based on how the company has worked in the 4 quarters, then we can make the adjustment for the next year. Some timetables are always subject to change. Timing should be flexible and tailored to the needs of the company. So whenever we have a timetable for the company, they should be flexible as well, so that they can meet the needs of the company. For example, a startup in a dynamic industry might revisit its strategic plan monthly. A mature business in a well-established industry might opt to revisit the plan less frequently. So depending on the nature of the business or depending on how old the business is, we can have the reviews. Suppose if it is a startup which has come up recently, they can have a review of the plans in every month. Whereas if it is a very established business, then they can go in for a review less frequently. With this, we come to the end of this session. Hope you have all followed this. Thank you.